There are many facets to playing great golf, or better than what you're used to, and seeing the constant rate of improvement and growth that all golfers search for. I wrote about this extensively in the theory of teaching that I put together, where I called the golf paradigm, and there were 5 elements to golf improvement. There was swing mechanics, the psychological aspect, the physical and the mental aspect, the physical aspect, which dealt with strength and flexibility, the integration of all 4 of the other elements, and the other one was club fitting. And my 2 guests today are experts in the club fitting world, and they are from Swing Fit Clubs, and the owner's name is Chris Wycoff, and his lead club technician and fitter, his name is Michael Gunny Montanez. And I was fortunate enough to go down to their studio. They have 2 of them, one here on Hilton Head Island down at the Sea Pines Resort, and the other down at the Biltmore in South Florida in Miami. Fortunate enough for me, I live close to here in Hilton Head, and I was able to go through a driver fitting with them, and I was so intrigued by their process that I asked them to come on the show and talk about that, as well as all the other fitting that they do. And we had a great conversation. They talk about some things that might go against the grain as far as the club fitting industry, and things such as why they view profile of a golf shaft and matching that to the golfer's swing more so than they rely on shaft flex. We also talk about lie angles, length of clubs, club design, different shafts, why artificial intelligence is playing such a major role in their system and how it's doing so, and the entire process of how they came up with that. So just a very deep dive. For some of you who might have been considering getting a club fitting, I would highly recommend it. For those of you who have gotten club fittings and things didn't work, maybe checking them out would be a good idea. Or at least listening to today's show will give you a much, much more educated perspective the next time that you go to get fit for your clubs, so that you're not going in blind and just listening to what someone tells you. You might actually have some data and some info of your own to ask questions to ensure that when you're spending the amount of money that you are going to for a driver, a new set of clubs, that it is what it needs to be and you're getting the most out of it so that your game can flourish. So please give a big Golf 360 welcome to my 2 guests today from Swing Fit Clubs, Mr. Chris Wycoff and Mr. Michael Gunny Montanez. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. 1, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. 2, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And 3, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This episode of the Golf 360 podcast is brought to you by Affinity Wealth Management Group. We all work exceptionally hard for our money, and none of us can afford to let that fall into the dark abyss of the big box financial service firms with their jack of all trades and master of none mantra, which basically means you become a number within a cookie cutter model, which is often accompanied by massive fees. Your future deserves more than average returns, and at Affinity Wealth Management, they ensure that your financial goals receive highly individualized, tailored attention from experts who are in the industry to be great and not average. As a client of Affinity Wealth, you will receive a customized solution to your customized life, keeping in mind your family's financial situation, values, and risk tolerance. Contact them today at 248-840-3863 or www.affinitywealthmg.com. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. All right, we're live. We're supposed to be. Red numbers are moving, so
all right,
whatever you say now is recorded forever.
Uh-oh, I know. I'll have to be on good behavior.
Well, hey, but before I even go, I mean, Gunny, you're the third Marine I've had on, so I always tell the Marine guys thanks for the service and what you all have done. It obviously has made a big difference and allows us to do things like podcasts.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
So let's just jump right in. You guys tell me about. Let's talk about Swing Fit, the business first, or the company, because we touched on it just a little bit earlier. I didn't know that it wasn't a franchise. It's yours, but you have multiple locations.
Yep, we have a couple locations. We have our home base here in Hilton Head. Have our office where we're doing this out of, which is just kind of in a little office park on Hilton Head on the south end, and then we do all of our fittings out of Sea Pines at the Learning Center there. And then we have a second location down in Coral Gables at the Biltmore Hotel in conjunction with the Jim McQueen Golf School there. So that's where we do all of our fittings out of, and then this home base office is where we do all the club building, club assembly.
And that's where we are now.
Yep.
We'll call it the studio.
The studio. Yeah, the studio.
Parkway.
Exactly.
So this is behind the curtain.
Yes, exactly. This is behind the curtain.
Where all the magic happens.
Yeah.
And so if you fit somebody down in Miami, are all the club work's getting done here, and then y'all ship it down there?
Yeah, we ship it to wherever we need to go to. We'll either ship it back down to Miami, we'll ship it to the individuals, whatever at work, wherever they want them to go to.
Gunny, do you go from here down there, or you?
Yeah, I travel back and forth every so often, and just make sure everything's going well over there. Make sure that fitters down there are taken care of, and things are running smooth.
Kind of nice to go back and forth from Hilton Head to South Beach, isn't it?
It doesn't suck.
You don't have to drive, do you?
Yeah, I do drive, but
now that is a haul.
It's actually not too bad. I think maybe the first time it seemed long, but
yeah,
now you just put in a podcast or a book and you're there.
You pay, you listen to something, keeps you occupied, and you just
Absolutely.
don't run into anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I've almost found it's almost easier than flying. It's right on that cutoff. It's about 8 hours. To do it, but you just kind of get in there and just go, and don't have to deal with security and connections or anything. And half the time when we're going down, we always are bringing shafts and heads and everything.
95 always gets that log jam around Jupiter.
Yeah,
right? Jupiter, North Palm. It doesn't matter what time of day, and they've got 5-6 lanes going each way.
Yeah,
and it could be just bumper to bumper. I never understood that.
Yeah, I have no idea why or what causes it, but it does.
Well, let's talk about what you guys do. Obviously, it's club fitting, but what differentiates what you do from, say, a setup, an off-course setup, or one of the box stores, or a club fitter that in a small town they'd find, that's they're local. How does it differ? Just kind of touch on some of the things you guys do that are unique.
Yeah, I think the first part is that we are at the point where we do hand assemble almost all of our clubs. Right, so we're not going to go,
and that's even the test clubs.
That's even the test clubs. Everything is we will use that. We only use aftermarket shafts that we know are very good shafts that consist. We find the consistency of those is so much higher. That allows us to guarantee that when somebody is fit into a club, and then the club they used in the fitting, and then the club we deliver are the same club.
Yeah, because that's usually if somebody's doing an order on a demo day and they're hitting it great.
Yeah.
And it comes, it's one spec, and then someone sticks it in at the factory, and they get shipped, and it's a completely different spec. Even though the labels are the same, it doesn't do anybody good.
Right, exactly.
And I think a lot of people listening are very familiar with that scenario.
Right, because it's just honestly, as expensive as the clubs are, you can go spend $550 or $600 on a driver, and that shaft is $10. Yeah, $15. And so you lose a lot in terms of the materials they're able to put into the shaft, and then the manufacturing tolerances. So can you get lucky with a stock shaft?
Yeah,
Absolutely. You sure can. Is it worth betting a $550 driver on it?
Because
it's not my...
You get online. It used to be the chat rooms, but if you look at the social media, and people are always commenting, I spent all this money, I got fit, and I paid X amount, hundreds for this club, and it doesn't work worth a shit. And the one I hit in the fitting worked great. Did these guys do something to the club that made me hit it well, and now I can't? I'm like, well, do you really think they're going to do something that when you're hitting and then sell you some piece of shit? No, that's not how it works.
No.
It's not in today's social media, internet world.
Yeah, no, it's not that they did something. It was just the tolerances are so wide that you put that $10 shaft in, and they're paid to build a lot of clubs really fast. So they just don't have the time or the ability to quality control on a lot of those things.
And Gunny, you're doing more of the technical side of this, is it?
No, I do pretty much everything. So building, fitting, ordering, shipping, all that stuff. So yeah, I'm in a little bit of everything.
Beats behind the counter, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
As an assistant?
I don't miss it. Anytime I go to the golf course and I see them over there answering calls and talking about the greens, I'm so glad I'm on the other side.
It's nice that the golf business has expanded enough that there are different aspects that you can get into, because that fold sweaters and answer phones stuff, I don't know how people do that.
I don't either. But I'd say that was like one part of why we're different. The other real part is how we address the limitation that is a part of all fittings for all amateurs, is the fact that in a fitting you only have a limited amount of time, and you only have in that time you can only hit a limited number of combinations of heads and shafts before fatigue, boredom, attention. If you're running a business, you can't have somebody in for a 10-hour fitting. Even if they could keep hitting, you just can't. So the limitation that all fitters are fighting is what are the heads and shafts a golfer gets to test. And the fitting is only as good as those options you're given. And what we kind of addressed is we were fitting a lot like a Club Champion or a True Spec or anybody is kind of how we got our start in this custom fitting world. And then we realized through years of experience that the logic that was used to manually select which heads and shafts somebody should use was really lacking. It was based primarily at club head speed at impact, and it was designed to optimize ball flight on the good shots.
Yeah, and all using the Doppler radar tracking devices.
Yeah, you're either using Doppler radar from TrackMan or FlightScope, maybe some cameras from Foresight. They all are very good tools for what they are. They are primarily designed to measure ball flight, and they measure the club head at impact. That's what they do. They don't tell you anything about the actual swing, how the golfer accelerated the club, decelerated the club, changed their angles, none of that throughout the
load
swing.
value, all that stuff.
All of it, yeah. So they just can't. It's not like to say that they're bad tools, because they're amazing tools.
Yeah, it serves a different purpose.
Exactly. Yeah, like we use some medical analogies. It's like a stethoscope is invaluable, and I don't know how many millions of lives a simple stethoscope has saved. But it's not going to do a lot of good to determine if you have a broken leg. You need an X-ray for that. It's just they're different tools. They do different things. And so what we have done is we started using an optical motion tracking system about 5 years ago. And with this, it's a gears system is what we use.
And that's the one, because I went through yours, it had all where you guys put me in the suit, and it had all the nodes.
The little
looked like we were making an EA Sports video.
Exactly. It's the same exact technology that they use in video games, movies, biomechanics research, everything.
And the importance of that is what? For those out there who might not know.
So we are able to collect 30,000 data points on the body and the club throughout the swing. So we're able to see how each golfer moves every individual part of their body and how that impacts the different clubs, right? How they're loading, twisting, torquing, drooping, deflecting, everything throughout the entire swing. So, instead of relying on 5 or 6 pieces of data per swing, which would be club head speed at impact, the
launch angle, spin rate,
attack angle, spin rate, we're getting about 30,000 per swing. which is obviously a ton of information. But then it's kind of worthless unless you make sense of that.
Right. You got to know how to interpret it.
Exactly. And honestly, a human can't interpret 30,000 data points.
So do you have AI that does that for you?
Yeah. So the first 2 years of having the motion tracking system, we didn't fit anybody with it. We just did research. We just had hundreds of people come in, and we had 10 different iron shafts and 10 different driver shafts that spanned the available spectrum of weights and flexes and profiles. And so we just were paying people to come in and just building up a data set. And then we turned the AI loose on it with the help of some data scientists. And so now what we've learned is how to correlate, or what are the most specific movements in the swing in terms of club fitting. It's not a value judgment of quality of swing or anything, but we learned what movements matter, and then how to correlate those and make recommendations into different head and shaft profiles.
What would be some examples of what you guys are, of movements that correlate to shaft fit?
Well, if you think of two different swings that say they're at 70 miles per hour with the driver, one swing is just on plane and, just like the typical, old man swing that just drives it right down the middle, 175 yards. And then you've got the other one that's coming like way over the top and trying to do something, but still only getting to 70 miles per hour. Well, the one that's on plane is going to put a way different load than the one that's coming over the top. The one that's coming over the top is putting so much stress on the shaft and making the head droop and all sorts of other things going on. When they go and try and use something more flexible, they can't even touch the ball. So as soon as they get into something a little stiffer and a little more appropriate for, what kind of motion they're using, they actually start finding the middle of the club face. And that's where the distance comes from. It's not from any kind of, kick from a shaft, because that's not a thing. It's just hitting the ball in the middle. So this is a way that we can finally get people to do that, other than just looking at swing speed, because swing speed is just a little part of it.
Yeah, it's funny you say hitting in the middle. When I was doing a lot of club fitting, oh God, it's hard to believe it's 16 years ago now, and some of the data that it was given was that, and I think it might have been Royal Precision, where they took the Iron Byron, and they had a driver at 100 and what was the one, 100 and I think 3 miles an hour at a quarter-inch off center, or no, I'm sorry, 105 at a quarter-inch off center, and 103 or 102 on center, and on center went, I think it ended up being like 5 yards longer, at a slower swing speed. So people are amazed at, like, well, I'm 70 years old, and I was told I need a regular shaft. It's like, well, you could step it up to a stiff, and the playability of the shaft is going to be much better, where you can find the face, and without changing anything else in your swing, we can get you 10, 15 yards.
Yeah, that happens a ton. We see that all the time.
What's the biggest distance increase you guys have seen on a driver by getting them out of something that was completely wrong into something that was like dialed in?
50, 60.
Yeah, I was going to say probably around 50 yards. and we're talking about now 50 yards for somebody that's swinging over 100 miles per hour, with the wrong combination. Yeah, maybe you can see that. But when somebody's swinging at 70 miles per hour and getting an increase like that,
it's revolutionary.
Yeah. So I had one gentleman, and he, of course, he came in and he tells me how old he is and how long he's been playing, and he, he's got a senior flex, and he thinks maybe he just needs a lighter senior flex. Okay, well, let's go through the thing, and he fit into the FX 2.0 380 M5, which is like
sounds like a fighter jet from
80 grams. It's a telephone pole, and he was just cracking the middle every time, and he hadn't done that in years. So he was, he was going to buy that no matter how much it cost. He wanted to take that club with him. So it was a good time. It's just fun to see that happen.
Yeah, we find that quite a bit. Is one of the myths or people that you just weren't able to understand until you had tools like optical motion tracking, is because it's about the only way you can measure how a club loads and unloads, is the assumption that a more flexible shaft will help increase club head speed. And we find. And
No, you lose spin control. You override the shaft. I used to see people who had a too flexible shaft that actually slowed them down.
a ton. A lot of the times it does is because they feel it loading and unloading.
Yeah, there's a sensory
much.
feedback that they know that it's coming in way too hot, and they got to gear down.
Right. And they'll see that, and then in reality, what happens is, as at the start of the downswing, as you're changing directions of your hands, the shaft goes into lag deflection, so the head is lagging behind the handle. Right. If you're envisioning if the shaft was perfectly straight. So as they're loading the shaft, it goes further and further into lag deflection.
Like a fishing pole for some people who can't. I mean, we're not on TV.
Yeah, it's a great visual, though.
It's a great visual, right? And so it will go, and so a more flexible shaft will deflect more. But what will happen is, so it will go into more lag deflection, which is storing energy in the shaft, right? Because the shaft wants to be straight. So the more you deflect it forward or backward or up or down, it wants to go back to where it is neutral. So the tension matches on all sides. And as you're going through and swinging, almost all golfers, once the shaft reaches parallel in the downswing, their hands start to slow down.
Yes, not many people realize that.
Right. It's just you can't, right? Because it's just not a strong, powerful position for the human body to be in.
It's just straight physics. Once something starts to approach vertical, it's as slow as it's going to be. Right. It's slowing down.
Yeah. And so as your hands get down, so your shaft is about parallel to the ground, you just can't keep accelerating. It's just our body won't work that way. And so then as your hands start slowing down, the shaft is it's starting to catch up. Right, so it's releasing that stored energy and going back towards neutral. And then, as we know, you flex anything, you don't pull it back and it snaps directly back to where it started. It will go past, right? So this is what we call lead deflection or kick. And so as your hands start to slow down, your shaft will go from lag to lead. And this can increase club head speed at that point by 2 or 3 miles an hour is the most we've ever seen. That's it.
Because the hands are acting more or less as a vice, right? As they get vertically under the shoulders, they're holding on, and then here comes the shaft.
Yeah.
Is what most people would be referred to kicking in.
Kicking in, right? The shaft will start to kick in, but here's the thing, what people don't know is, have you seen one, Gunny, in the last 3 years where it kicked in at impact?
No.
None of us have, because what the shaft does is it kicks in before impact. And it reaches its maximum lead deflection before impact. And so at this point, it's actually going back the other way towards neutral. So a softer shaft will have more lag and lead deflection. It just won't help you pick up speed at impact, which is completely different than what people assume is happening.
Yeah, and it's losing. I mean, it's already lost its energy by the time. The ideal energy transfer, it's a power leak as it gets to the ball, because now the face isn't stabilized at impact. Correct. Coming in impact. So their ability to hit center face contact is now been reduced.
Completely reduced, because this extra flexion, it's not just in one plane. It's three-dimensional.
Yeah, and you tell some people that the shaft, it bends, as you mentioned, it bends backwards, right? So like a fishing pole, as we described it. But then not many people realize that the shaft actually looks like a C coming into impact, as you talked, the lead deflection. And then it also bends down, as we'll get into on toe droop. And you tell them that, and they're like, "You're right, there's no way."
Right. And then if you want to add a third dimension and look at it from the top, because the CG of the club head is not in line with the shaft. So the CG is out away from the shaft, so it induces not just lag and lead deflection or up and down droop, but it also induces twist. So the more flexible a shaft is, the more all of these happen.
Yeah, even if you start playing with the torque of it, you can't get a super soft shaft with a super low torque. It's going to feel horrendously bad. Yeah, it'll feel like a noodle.
Well, it's interesting. They've tried some now. There have been a few that have been out. They feel brittle and harsh, and they've learned, though, that it actually, even with the torque, it still doesn't control the twist very much on that.
Well, I'll have students come to me, because I have not done club fitting per se in over a decade, and they'll say, well, I'm getting I've gone from the SM2, we'll use TaylorMade as an example, to the Stealth, and I'm going to get the same shaft. And I say, okay, but is the center of gravity the same? Is the heel to toe same? Is the base height the same? Is the hosel depth the same? Is the hosel length the same? Like, what are you talking about? Like, well, it's going to react different, so you can't just take that shaft from the old one and stick it in the new one.
Correct.
So you got to go get rechecked. I mean, you might need a different shaft, different spec.
You might, in that scenario, it probably wouldn't be a ton different, but say you were going to go from like a Cobra to a Ping.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that
was a huge one because there's about 12 grams difference weight in the head weight. So, Ping just makes heavy drivers. Their heads are heavier.
Yeah.
Cobras typically are light.
One thing people don't realize is John Rahm is a good example. He's got the same shafts that he's played for 10 years in his driver and his 3-wood. But as he's changing heads, they have to customize those heads to fit his shaft because he was playing TaylorMade. Now he's in Callaway. So they have to make that Callaway head kind of act the way
perform
the
the same, have the same properties throughout the swing.
Yeah. So it's, like you said, you can't just plug and play. Now, Callaway from one year to the other or TaylorMade from one year to the next, that's going to be closer. And usually you're okay. But a 10-year gap, a lot can change in that time.
Yeah, it can change. And I mean, look at going back to the older days in the 80s or early 90s when guys would change, and even the women would change companies and they'd change clubs. And they Payne Stewart's a glaring example. Remember, he went to Spalding and he just fell off the planet for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I think, what's his name on the West Coast out in California? Tom designs clubs and does fitting.
Washawn?
Tom Washawn. I think Tom got his set and started grinding on the heads and got everything working based off the chassis he was playing, and then Payne made his resurgence. It's not. I mean, that's hard to get through to some people, amateur golfers in particular. Well, pros that too. That it's not always the arrow. I mean, the Indian is the arrow. Arrow plays a huge part.
Right. You need both. Right. So we will never say a club fitting is more important than a lesson or the swing because it's not. It just flat out isn't. But if you're going to go running, you probably don't want to be wearing high heels. You can go running.
You wear combat boots.
You can or combat boots.
That's not fun either,
right? If you're going to go running, I'd probably kind of want a pair of running shoes that fit. Right, so you can make your life a lot easier and get a lot more out of it if you're fit properly. I think one of our another fitter who taught a lot. A couple years ago, he about had a breakdown on me because he had just started fitting and had a customer in that was literally doing every anti-slice move that had ever been invented, and he was doing every one of them at the same time, and he was still slicing. And he fixed them in about 10 minutes because his clubs were so far off that literally nothing he could do with the swing could overcome how bad the club was fit for him.
No, you can't change a pattern, and if a club doesn't fit, it doesn't match the golfer, the DNA, so to speak.
Yeah.
That power output and everything else.
The funny thing about that story is, because I remember him telling me that story, and he remembered somebody that he would give lessons to because he was a PGA professional down in Atlanta, and he'd given lessons for a year, and tried working on all sorts of different things, couldn't fix the slice. And he really just wondered, wow, did I make that guy spend all sorts of money for nothing because all he needed was a fitting? It's a lot of times. Do you remember
what he did? How he tweaked the clubs, modified?
It was, honestly, he went to a stiffer shaft.
He went to a much stiffer, actually a little bit shorter, and changed the lie angle because the guy was playing, there's also the myth with a stiff shaft. It's like, oh, you'll never hit the right side, right? It'll go through. And so a stiff shaft will, a softer shaft will help you fight a slice, is what some people believe.
Yeah, that's like an old wives' tale.
It is, right? So he had gone to this super soft shaft. In reality, what was happening was it was drooping so much, the toe was getting stuck in the ground about 6 inches before the ball. And this guy
was it a super soft tip too? Like remember the old Tiger Sharks?
Yeah, it was
super active tip.
It was just a noodle what the guy was playing, and so we really stiffened him up, got his lie angle appropriate and the length, and all of a sudden this guy, he felt bad, or it was bad because he's like, how many people did I not know this and just try to force through a lesson to compensate for the clubs? But this poor guy like had a lot of work left because he was no longer slicing, but he was hitting 45 degrees left of target, dead straight every time, because now he had to unlearn all the compensations that he had put in over the years to make up for the bad club. That's an extreme example, but it happens.
But it absolutely happens.
Yeah. So I think, what we've done is, by not focusing first on ball flight, like our AI, what it does is it really measures those variables in the swing, and then it recommends the shaft and head that's going to help you hit in the center.
Does the AI on the list of is it like a list of criteria that the AI has, and is it in a specific order that it has a preference on 1 through 100?
There's some different weights. There's different variables, and the different variables have weights on them, and some are more or less. For fun examples, swing speed at impact is in our equation.
I think, and I think you'd find it'd be very difficult to argue that. I think most people would agree.
It just happens to be our 52nd most relevant variable. And so it's down the list. It's not that it's irrelevant. It's just there's a lot more that is more relevant to it. And so then when we were doing the AI, we trained it to solve, because when you're setting up AI, it doesn't know anything. It's just dumb, right? It's a mathematical approach to solving a problem. But you have to, as a human, have to define what the problem is and what's the optimal solution. So we didn't train it to optimize, to have a perfect ball flight or hit 18 degrees launch or any of that. What we did is we trained it to, over the course of multiple shots, minimize impact dispersion on the face. And so that's what our whole approach is. And so as we were talking about it before, it's when you minimize the impact dispersion, 1, you get a higher ball speed. 2, you have less left to right variation. And then 3, honestly, I'm not going to say launch is unimportant or anything, but you start hitting the ball in the center of the face, your launch angles are going to be pretty close. Sure, we'll then go the next step and determine if you need to be in a 9 or 10.5 degree driver or which iron refines your launch angle to get it perfect. But even then, if you don't have that right, it's still okay because we're going to be really close just by hitting it in the center of the face.
Because I know a lot of fitters, when they were using the Flight Scope or TrackMan only, spin was such a high criteria item, and I used to sit there and argue with them. It wasn't even an argument because I'd had a friend who had talked to he brought this up at a big seminar, I believe it was, and he had talked to the head of engineering at NASA. The guy had told him, he said, if we would have based the lunar module return to Earth and use spin as a high criteria, the thing would still be out in orbit. So I was arguing, and my brother and I have had this conversation many times, because when he was doing the club fitting, I said, if you're relating it to spin too much, there's a lot more variables that can play a much more important role than just spin. I think spin got to be like one of the top 2 or 3 things that too many people were using. Like, okay, well, if you're going to use that, you better know the design, the engineering of the head, because you can modify it from that, and you stick some shaft in there just to optimize spin, and now what is it going to do to the person's swing?
Right. That's that is so true. Is you can't optimize anything with the shaft other than we feel that you shouldn't optimize anything with the shaft other than impact.
I think most of the better fitters, or more more known fitters, will say the same thing. If you're going to adjust spin, you adjust it with the head or the golf ball, but the shaft has no bearing on the spin.
Well, the big one, this is going back to when not naming companies. I don't want to throw any company under the bus, but Steve Stricker he was one of the best iron players on the planet, and he could not keep his driver, or really even in some instances his 3-wood on the planet, and they stuck him in that shaft that had a super stiff tip. Remember, because those heads were designed with a low weight in the bottom, and it would just upshoot the spin on everything. So they gave him a shaft, and then he was playing Project X with the super soft tip. It's like there's no chance.
No, even a player of that caliber.
No, as much balls as he's hitting,
you can't. Even at that level, you can't manipulate and control every club. And so that's another thing we do is when we're fitting, and we think it's huge for amateurs, even good amateurs, right? I know we want to all pretend we are on tour and stuff, but
Oh, if I could just practice every day for a year, I could
right.
make it. I can go to Q school.
I could practice every day for my life, and my hands are not anywhere. The nerves don't fire in that pattern. I could never be that good a golfer, no matter what. And even golfers that are that good, they cannot manipulate 14 different clubs.
No. You can't learn to manipulate consistently. I used to tell that to guys all the time. Nobody is that good. I don't care who you are.
I don't care if it's Tiger or any. Well, I've heard some stories. Tiger maybe could, but nobody else could. And literally, it's like we preach consistency. Like we'll put 99% of the time, we'll put the same shafts in the fairway as a driver. Mm-hmm. And somebody's like, oh, if you use this little higher launch shaft, you can refine the launch angle a little bit better and get it land a little softer. I'm like, yeah, we'll just get you a club head that has 1 degree more loft.
Right.
Or because delivering the club head back to the ball consistently is far more important than that 1 degree that you maybe in theory could optimize on the perfect shot.
Don't you just love some of the garage mechanics that come in and want to tell you guys, because they read it somewhere, they were on some chat
room.
Get them
all the time.
Yep. Yeah, we get it all the time.
I'll never forget when I was in a trailer and the guy I was working for, and he was as good as I've ever seen. And he's got the back door, so the 24-foot trailer, and he could drop the back when it was really hot, so you could get some air through there. And I don't remember what course it was at, but some guy comes up and he's working, and some guy's trying to talk to him, and he's kind of going along, and the guy's just trying to show how much he knows. Finally, he puts the club down, and the guy had about 3 or 4 buddies with him, and he says, "Do you know the percentage difference in toe droop from a Dynalite to a Dynamic Gold? Can you calculate that?" And the guy didn't know what to say, and his buddies just busted out laughing, like, "I got you. You don't know shit. We told you never knew anything." But you get those all the time, and I would have to say, you see it in the coaching side.
Yeah.
Somebody helping their kid, which is, I don't knock that. If someone wants to help their kid, that's a parent-child moment or aunt-uncle moment. But club fitting especially, because people will read, especially if they might have been an engineer.
Yeah.
And then come in and tell you guys how it works. But they're reading the static. They might not know the dynamic aspects, which is what you're talking about.
It's funny. We love when engineers come in because they get it right away. Mm-hmm. They
good engineers that hacks.
A real engineer.
A
real engineer with somebody that has a degree. They absolutely, completely love what we do. Because they're like, you mean other people aren't doing this? And
no, this isn't the norm.
No, this is different. The ones where it's some of the other professions that we see that have been very successful and everything, those get to be a little bit of a challenge because, a lot of our fittings are not what you would assume, right? Like the whole swing speed and weight, they're based on a oversimplified double pendulum model from the 1950s, and it hasn't been updated. It just hasn't, right? In the 1950s, you were still using slide rules. And you just couldn't, it's not that they did it wrong, it's just they didn't have the information that we do now. And they didn't have computing power that we could spend. And, we're still refining and improving the AI, but when we were doing it, it would take about 18 hours per run to do all the simulations.
Per run meaning an individual? Or run meaning a group of the data?
When we were trying to determine the primary variables, and in the AI, what we can do is with gears is we can make up any variable because every frame we can make positions. And so we were testing hundreds of different variables for relevance and all throughout the swing. And, so how about is it hand position relative to the heel of the club at 4 different spots? Does that matter? Does it not matter? And so we're running and testing all of these different variables.
Not many people think about that because I don't remember the numbers, but I can't remember. Is the toes moving as it comes to impact or into impact? Is it 4 miles an hour faster than the heel?
Roughly. It depends on. It's close. It depends on the width of the club. And so we're just looking more about, honestly, what we're trying to do is simulate how forces are put on and subtracted from the club. And so that's where we found that it really matters, those indicators.
I got to bring this up because I had both of them on the show. How do you? So there's you guys are aware of the Alpha Wars because we talked about that a little bit. You got the Jacobs and the Manzella camp, and then you got the Finney, and I guess it would be the McKenzie and even Como camp, and it's like when you're talking, every time someone talks about forces and torques on the shaft, I think of these two groups, more Finney and Manzella than the others. And I get along with them both. I think they're both very good guys. But they...
The nice thing is we don't care.
Right.
We really don't care because, they're going and fighting that battle. And for us, it doesn't matter because we're not, when you're doing AI, one of the things people don't quite understand at AI is it's not like you're necessarily trying to understand every variable in there. You're just trying to recreate and be predictive. So what we've done is, there's some of the variables in there. I have no idea why they're in there. But the computers and the data show that they matter. And it doesn't say why it's in there. Like, why is
it part of the mathematical equation, the engineers you guys work with that implemented those things?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's honestly, that's, the AI is like even the engineers. No one knows why those different.
So the geniuses in the basement put some of those things together.
It's in the cloud technically is, why those things are. And so that's what, with AI, you don't know why certain things are recommended. You just know that they work if you have a good model. And that's what we were able to put together. So the Alpha War, I don't know. I don't care. To be honest, I just stay out of it.
Leave that to those two guys and the groups and
right, exactly.
So the coaching world to hash that out amongst themselves.
Yeah. So in a way, when you're developing an AI algorithm, it's very interesting because you have to decide what to feed it, and so we were trying hundreds of different variables, working things out, and then. It will just go on and simply said, okay, here's what it is. And you have two sets of data. You have your 75% of your data set is what you run the models on to learn. And then you keep 25% off and you test it on that 25%. So you'll have those golfers that will come through and we develop the models based on the 75% of golfers. And then we would then go and say, okay, how close does this model predict the outcomes for the next 25%?
So would that 25% be from the polls? The 75% is coming from the middle and you're doing 25 from 12?
Random.
Okay.
You just do a random sample. And so then you just throw in as many variables as you can or many as you can afford to run the samples and the tests. And then it comes out with the algorithm. And, at first... they weren't close because we were kind of starting with some of the traditional metrics that people thought. And then we had to start really getting creative and putting in more and different variables that like people would never even think of. And then that's what you use to...
What would be some of those, the ones that most people wouldn't think of?
I mean, one of them, like we were just talking about before, is hand speed, right? The deceleration of hand speed into impact. And there's a few people that are basically the same from 3/4 down. Like, when the shaft is parallel to impact, they're in the very minority, but it's basically how much your hands start decelerating and then when did they start decelerating. Those are two variables that in club fitting, people would be like, what does that have to do with anything? And those are two of our more powerful variables.
Well, yeah, it's got a lot to do, especially if you're talking about speed at impact.
Right. Well,
it's not the speed that it's affecting. It's affecting how much force is being put on the shaft.
Right.
It's basically you're putting the brakes on and letting the
head release.
Yeah, the head release, or it's like hitting a tree, and you're not wearing your seatbelt, and you're the head of the club.
Catapulting that head.
Exactly.
Right.
So, so big difference from the guy that just speeds through and never slows down, which is not too many of them, but there are some.
Which is quite funny, is that's the Iron Byron model. So what we've learned too is the Iron Byron model that was kind of everything was based on is no human with two hands can replicate that model. We came close.
No, especially not for club fitting.
You can't swing.
No.
You cannot replicate that swing because it has a fixed pivot point with no rotation.
Arm, isn't it?
It's one arm.
I'm not mistaken.
And so I was giving a presentation at the PGA show a couple years ago, and I bet the audience $100 that I could create a closer, and I'm not a real good golfer. I can't replicate the consistency of Iron Byron. I don't think anybody can. We should all hope to emulate its consistency, but never try to replicate the swing. And so I did a kind of a bet with anybody in the audience that wanted to get up. I said, I'll give you $100 if you can create a trace on gears that is closer to Iron Byron's trace than me. So I had 7, 8 guys come up, and they were all better golfers than me. And their traces were not even anywhere near what the Iron Byron is. And I said, all right, anybody else want to try? And
no,
so
it's in a fixed plane.
It's in a fixed plane. And so I tried it. And it took me just screwing around, late at night when we were doing this. It took me about 6 months to figure out how to swing like Iron Byron. Is basically how I do it is I stand even with the ball facing away from the target with the club in my left hand and leaned over about 45 degrees to the right.
So you're coming in very shallow?
You have to come in very shallow, and you have to be facing backwards. And you can create a trace that looks almost exactly like Iron Byron's as long as you do that. You have one hand on the ball, face the wrong way, and swing. And nobody's going to teach that.
Mo Norman was the only one that came pretty close to it.
He didn't.
And he still had a loop.
Nope.
He had a big loop on
He had a big loop. His isn't even close at all. I've seen his. I've seen Bryson DeChambeau's. I've seen them all. None of them are any remotely close. They can appear close in 2D.
Yes, in 2D. I think
in 2D, they appear close. In 3D, they're not. But literally, they can't because they have 2 hands on the club. So the closest Iron Byron swings are honestly like the wounded warriors that are golfing. The ones that are kind of maybe have had an IED or something. They have one arm and they are strapped to the golf cart. That is basically.
But even with that, if you get into if you have the belief system in like Mike Adams' program to where he's measuring the forearm versus the upper arm length, and then you're going to come down on a different plane, and yet your wingspan, so you're going to go back on one plane and come down on another.
Yeah,
it's not possible. Anatomically, it's not possible for a lot of people.
Right, and so that's the key. Is like, so why is everybody in the industry using a model that no human can replicate? To me, that's not a good model to base
antiquated.
What's antiquated and impossible.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's kind of was the impetus for what we started to do and learn from.
Talk about iron fitting a little bit, because we talk mostly focus on drivers. Somebody comes in, they call you guys up, and then they come in. They want to get fit for irons. Do you focus? What's the differentiation or the process of focusing on the shaft and or focusing on the head? So do you go off what they like to look at and then fit the shaft to the club head and them, or do you? So
the shaft is a totally different thing. The only thing that would influence, the shaft other than the AI would be if they had an injury like an overuse injury or tendonitis or something. We would try to lean towards, the highest recommended graphite shafts, just for the vibration, benefits. And when we do the initial testing, even if they do perform well with a certain weight, if that weight does not feel comfortable to them, they have a way that they can say, yeah, this shaft feels too heavy or this feels too light. So no matter how they performed with it, the AI takes into account that weight is not a good fit. So they'll put it back in the recommendations.
How do you sort out it? Like if they're playing a shaft that's at, say, 130 grams, which is, in my opinion, way too heavy for. Tiger shouldn't be playing 130.
Maybe. Why not?
Depends. But if he's playing, if someone comes in, they got a 130 gram shaft, and they go to UST recoil 680, and now you're looking at 80, and they say that's way too light, but they need to be somewhere much lower. How do you work within that? Well, first, because you kind of know what they need, but it's so drastic from what they're used to.
We don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
We don't know.
Okay.
I never make the assumption. Now, I used to. When I first started doing all this, and I remember the other fitter that I was with, we would always have like a guess at what is going to be a good shaft, because that's what you do. That's what every fitter does, is they just look at your swing and say, oh, yeah, I think this might work. So we'd have something in mind, and then the AI would come out with, the top recommendations, and we would try and compete with the AI and never beat it. Just not even close.
Yeah. So what we do is in the process of fitting, right? It's the same process for a driver and an iron. Driver, we use a driver head, and we have 4 different shafts, different weights and flex profiles. Irons, the same. and you hit the same, control iron. And we're looking at one from the pure empirical data side, how their body and clubs are measurement. That's the 30,000 gears data points per swing is collected. And then after each, we take 4 or 5 swings with each one of those 4 control shafts. And then we ask subjective questions because, I don't care technically if it's the best club in the world. If a golfer doesn't believe in it or like it, it doesn't matter. It won't work. It just won't, And
no,
so
it's buried in their head. The seed's been planted.
Head. Exactly. And so what we didn't have it in at the very beginning, but then we learned we have to incorporate the subjective feedback in. And so when we're doing these heads, these shafts that we're testing, it's blind. So we don't tell the golfer how heavy this one is or how light it is or how stiff it is or not. And so we do ask, 80% of the answers are it's fine, but then we do look for the outliers, 10% too heavy, 10% too light, or too stiff or too soft. And if somebody is saying, oh, this shaft is too heavy for me, even if it is the lightest shaft in there, the AI is trained to move the recommended weight down by a few grams.
So does the AI have a shaft based off some of the data you inputted from, let's say they go through the baseline hitting session with their own club, 7-iron, 6-iron. Does it establish what a recommendation would be? And
not off of their own club. We only use their own clubs for comparison. So when you're indoors, when we first start coming in, you're going to take your 15 or so control swings. Those are using our clubs. And that we have tested those shafts extensively. We know exactly what they are. We know exactly what the heads are, everything. And the AI knows what those are. And so then based on that, it creates, and the subjective feedback on weight and flex, it creates the optimal shaft and head for that golfer. And then
it takes all the data from all 4 different clubs that they hit.
Correct. And then it gets fed into the AI and then the AI will kick out and say, here is your number 1 top closest head and shaft. And then even if it's made up, right, it will say, here's the specs of what would be perfect. And then it goes through our database of heads and shafts and finds the matches that are the closest. And then at that point, that's what you then go outside and test. And we test those top 3 recommendations against the golfer's own 7-iron or driver for performance.
And I would have to assume that the overwhelming majority of the time that whatever the AI is recommending, that as you start to narrow it down, that they're saying, yeah, this is the one I like, and it's the one that it was recommended.
Almost, about 80% of the people actually end up buying the clubs, so that's a guaranteed success. And then even more, not some people will be like, yeah, it's better, but maybe I don't feel like it today, or it's too much money or something. So yeah, we have over about a 90+% success rate in identifying clubs that are better.
When it is, if it isn't that 10%, is there anything identified that is it so drastically different from what they're used to?
Sometimes,
and that they're so used to it. Like you don't know how bad you feel, until you feel good.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. When someone's used to eating burgers and Coke and pizza all the time, and they finally start eating vegetables and chicken,
and they're going to almost go through withdrawal.
Yeah, they go through withdrawal, and then by the 6th to 8th week, they're like, "Man, I've never slept so good. I never felt so great."
Yeah, so that can work in our favor or against us, right? Sometimes the differences are so drastic that even in that fitting session, they can't get used to it. Right. So that will happen sometimes. And, we ask anybody to come back. We want to, if you're not feeling it, come back. Right. I'm not just trying to make a quick buck. We want people to be happy and satisfied and everything. So we invite people to come back as much as they need to get it right. But then the other thing can be too is, if they've been playing, like the example you were using was a 130 gram X1, X100 in your irons, and you end up fitting into a 95 gram Fujikura Pro stiff shaft, graphite, which has a soft tip. Odds are your first round is not going to be perfect. It's just not going to be.
And the adjustment's too big.
It is. And so sometimes, we tell everybody that, give us 4 rounds, do this. Not everybody listens, and some people get upset about the immediacy of it didn't work perfect the first time and it gets in their head. But that's rare. It's really rare. But if it does, we just invite, again, people to come back in. We're used to working with people because Hilton Head and both Miami are both tourist destinations. So it's amazing what you can do over the phone with a little bit of video. Anything, we can almost always get somebody.
Are a lot of the people you guys are fitting, is it tourists, or there's only so many locals?
It's a mix.
It's a mix.
It's a mix between both. I'd say probably 50-50.
Yeah, I guess it's a little unique here because, you get a lot of tourists here, but you also get a lot of people that have summer homes here, or just they're here part of the year. So it's not completely tourist, but it's not also locals either. It's that those ones that just travel back and forth. So
you got a lot of club pimps, I call them. These guys have more clubs in their shop than the pro shop does.
Yeah, it's funny. We've learned too that we're not, notwithstanding somebody that might be in this room. When somebody wants to, they want to go get the newest, coolest shaft or this one special edition putter head face or something, right? Like, we're happy to work with those people, but it's really not what we're set up to do in terms of, somebody says, I want to get fit for the new Diamana Tensei white, whatever it is. So I'm like, what are you talking? I mean, do you want me to just put the order in?
Right. If you're coming to me already and you're saying this is what I want, that's not what we do.
It's not what we do, right? So our whole goal is to not just take somebody's order. I mean, we will, but we kind of feel bad about it because we really want to help people find the right thing.
At what point do you have to draw that line because you don't want somebody out there saying that they came here and they're hitting it bad? Because that doesn't do you any good either.
No, we'll be pretty upfront.
Yeah, we haven't had any kind of issues like that. Since I guess I've been here like 3 years.
Yeah.
In the 3 years, I think I've only seen two shafts replaced. That it just was not going to work for whatever reason. They had it in their head, or something changed, or whatever. But I do a lot of rechecks, and it almost always goes the same. It's usually either, they come and try to show me what the club is doing, and it works perfect because now they're not trying to hit it further than whatever. They're just hitting it normal.
That ego jumps pretty quick. You get them 20 yards, now they want 40.
Exactly. Right. And that's a lot of times that's what happens. They saw the numbers, and they're like, oh, man, I'm going to come out here show all my friends how, far I'm hitting my 7-iron, and it goes off the rails because their swing goes off the rails. So when they come show me and they're just taking normal swings, it works great. And I just kind of let them know, and they're usually pretty good with that. So.
The other one we get is their buddies or maybe their club pro back home will, for whatever reason, tell them they were fit wrong. Because,
I mean, think about it. If you see, like I've got someone, she's 5 feet tall. Okay, so, I mean, her driver was almost 41 and a half, I think, inches, because she just couldn't swing anything. And but she fit into a stiff shaft and didn't have a lot of swing speed, but great improvements. She was super happy. That's the one that just left the review. And but I guarantee you, if somebody looks at that, they're going to say, oh my gosh, what did they do to you? But she's fine. It works great. She loves it. So, but that could start affecting her. They could start saying, no, you should really be in a lady shaft,
Because obviously they know much more than us.
Yeah.
I mean, the podcast has given me a lot of insight into a lot of experts.
Yeah.
And it's like when somebody says, well, you should be in a lady shaft, I say, okay, based off of what? And that means you don't know what a lady shaft is. Just because it's pink and has an L on it and might be 48 grams or 55 grams, that doesn't mean it's the right shaft for them.
No.
You're just showing your ignorance by saying that you need to be in a lady shaft.
Yeah.
Same thing as a senior or even a stiff at that matter, because you can't determine, if a stiff in Fujikura is going to be stiffer than a stiff in Acura or a stiff off the shelf.
Well,
they're all going to be different.
A perfect example is, like, to just do a fun test, is that 95 gram Fujikura Pro stiff iron shaft that I referenced earlier is technically softer than a 70 gram steel fiber senior. So, when somebody says, oh, this stiff is too stiff for you, you should be in a senior, I kind of laugh. And I was like, well, how about this one? This one has an A on it. Does that count? Even though it's technically stiffer than that one Fujikura stiff.
Does the AI, when you get into irons, does it factor in to the iron head design at all? Because as you get different blade lengths, and we talked about toe droop earlier, and it starts
a little bit,
more.
but to be honest, the droop and everything, the CGs are all so close. I mean,
would that you say be advancement technology of manufacturing today versus 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, and I mean, like a 7 iron is going to, it doesn't matter what brand, almost all 7 irons weigh the same. They're very close, within a couple of grams, so maybe one swing weight or something different, but they're all very, very close. Yeah. And
ping is the only issue that we have with drivers that we might have to make a tweak.
Right, because they're the only real outlier in terms of weight. But when reality is, like, if the droop is going to be more or less, that's why we check lie angle at the end, right? You only check it in the recommended club with the recommended shaft.
Paul Wood was on, and I think we touched on a little bit on their theory about why their heads were heavier, and I'd have to go back and listen to it. I think their feeling was, and I've heard this debated among some very, very smart engineers in the industry, is that whether you go heavier or smaller and more compact, the theory is that you can pick up swing speed because once the object starts moving, if it's moving in the right direction, can be moved quicker with less effort.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
but you're getting splitting some hairs.
You're really splitting some hairs.
Really
there.
Smart guys are.
Yeah, we'll let them worry about that, right? Honestly, what we're really fixated on is just helping the golfer hit the center of the face. And that little tiny bit difference between a couple grams here or there, the way the algorithm works, it doesn't really matter.
Does algorithm, is algorithm telling you guys what length the club should be as well, be it a driver or an iron?
Not yet. We're working on adding that in because honestly, this is one kind of like swing weight where I was always raised, you don't give an answer unless you know you're right. Type of thing is we don't understand fully length, and we definitely don't understand swing weight. And anybody that says they do, I disagree with them.
Yeah, I've
just
never
on
been
principle.
a big proponent of swing weight.
Well, I'm not saying I think it matters. I just don't know how it matters, and I don't know the variables.
I shouldn't say a proponent. I should say if there's a list of 20 things, it's going to be close to the bottom.
It could be. It could be. We don't know
because once you start if someone, it turns out that they need to be a degree flatter, now the swing weight goes up. Because you're moving the toe further away from the end of the club. Now you're going to change the swing weight. You move it closer to, it's going to get
a little bit,
right? A little bit.
And
when
bit.
Some of these guys, like as we talked earlier, these self-proclaimed engineers. So swing weight is number 1 or 2 criteria that you need to use. Oh, what are you going to do if you change the lie? What if you change it 2 degrees, or 3 degrees?
Yeah, I don't think it's the most important. I think the shaft profile is by far the most important.
Shaft profile.
Where swing weight is really important for me right now, I would say, is in the build process. If you have, your swing weight is all over the place, you might have a club that just doesn't work very well for you, and you don't know why.
Yeah, a lot of people have that. Like, of all my clubs, I cannot hit my 5 iron at all.
Right.
But I can strike my 7 iron.
Swing weight's probably off.
Yeah,
or the shaft.
Something is off.
Something's off. Yeah, so what we'll do is we fixate on our build of matching the swing weights so that they are incredibly tight so there's no variance. Now, can I tell you, I think that's important. Can I tell you, is it more important to have a D0 or a D3? No, I can't. I don't know that yet, so we don't try to pretend that we do. We did some tests. I think you were there when we were doing
there's so many variables that play a role that are more beneficial to them.
Correct.
Like, okay, if they need a thicker grip, well, that's going to change the swing weight. And like I said, the lie angle, there's these little things that are going to tweak the swing. Again, for someone out there who's probably pulling their hair out and saying, these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. Okay, fine. But there's a lot. We're just saying there's more important things.
Right.
That
And
can be
I
factored in.
would love to, if somebody is out there pulling their hair out and they have a valid reason of why somebody should be in a D3 versus somebody should be in a D1, I would love to talk
Well, I
to
mean,
them.
we were
I would
talking,
just to learn.
as you
right?
mentioned, going back to the 50s. I mean, and I don't remember what the year was, but the swing weight scale, the fulcrum point changed from, I think, was it 14 inches to 21 inches or something like that?
Probably
But
21 to
they
14.
changed the fulcrum point. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, if the industry can't even agree on where the fulcrum point is this really in the top 5 things that you should be considering? Because you see some of these people just slapping on all this lead tape. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, well, this one doesn't match this one. I'm like,
Yeah. We like to match them, but yeah, it's funny. We did start to notice, and this is where it's hard, right? Because you have to incorporate probably 15 different movements in the swing to be smart about making the recommendations. Like, I have a very round swing, right? I don't have much lag. I don't swing well, but just simply put, it's not the right way to do it. But I'll notice that the higher my swing weight goes, the more over the top I get. And then other people we've seen where you put higher swing weight, and it helps them drop it in and stay behind. Now, gets interesting. But what we haven't done is figured out what are all those variables in the swing that would put somebody into the group A versus group B. And so that's why we don't have swing weight in AI yet, is we don't know that yet. And the same for length, right? Length is so subjective. Because a friend that we both know, one of the director of golfs over at Palmetto Dunes, is 6'7", with relatively short arms. And we have spent years trying to get him into clubs the proper length for him. And none of them work except standard, because he's played his whole life at standard. And I mean,
well, once someone gets a pattern in there that's that ingrained, and he's not 20 years old anymore, it's
Right.
going to be hard to fix. The formula that I've always used that has come out exceptionally close was the middle knuckle of the middle finger of the lead hand. I think we talked about that a little bit when I came to do my fitting. And if it's a 2.5 to 1 ratio.
And, I think that'll get you really, really close.
Really close.
Really, really
I was
close.
going to say, all those static measurements are great to start.
Yes.
But,
you always have to go hit them because
It has to be dynamic.
Well, even I mean, when I was playing, I got to play with some athletes from other sports, especially the hockey guys. They would always say, "I said, well, you're probably a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch off, short, long, whatever the scenario was." And they're like, "Well, I play enough, and I just need to practice more." I'm like, "Well, every groove on your club's 1/8 of an inch. If you're 1/2 inch off in your length, that's 4 grooves. Are you good enough to make up 4 grooves every time you play? No, you're not. I hate to break it to you. Or if it's a 1/4 inch.
Yeah.
Guys, and some of the guys ask me, what if I change shoes? I'm like, okay, well, go listen to Sasha McKenzie's discussions on why you should wear the same pair of model golf shoe whenever you're going to go play.
It does. Like, I mean, we've done, when the whole zero drop thing came out, there's actually a great example of, I won't name his name, but Michael Neff, that the kind of founder, director of Gears, was fitting a Tour Pro. And this Tour Pro was playing amazingly well. Had a small injury, but changed his shoes. And for 6 months, he was terrible. And brought him in, and he had gone on Gears before when he was playing well. And then he came back, got on Gears again.
He's all over the map.
No, he was actually completely, almost exactly the same, except his body angle was everything was like a 3/4 of a degree forward because the new shoes he'd put on had a higher heel.
That's amazing. It's funny you bring that up because I've got a pair of those zero shoes that I work out in. And one day I just took them out to the range because I was just too lazy to go change and put on my golf shoes and was hitting balls. I'm like, this is awesome. Just stripe.
I mean, to be honest, it's I'm not going to say one is better than the other. It's just what you're used to and what works. And so then this Tour Pro went back to the flatter shoes, and I think the next week he was top 5, and did it a couple more.
Which
times.
is interesting, as we the Masters was a month ago, and Tiger went and switched his shoes. Now he did it for the stability of his leg, which is needed.
Right.
I'm just watching that, wondering how Nike was cringing watching that.
I'm sure they were.
Shoe company and
Yeah.
having a hard time coming up with a shoe that would work for him.
Work for him. And, you know, I think that's one of those things where as an amateur golfer, I would kind of caution somebody to get too involved in that. You know,
Yeah, that's a Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. You could take the wrong pill and you lose yourself.
Right. But yeah, you definitely don't want to be having two pairs of golf shoes you rotate between. One is a traditional, maybe a FootJoy with a raised heel and then a zero drop, right? You don't want to be doing that round to round. That's going to be making your life harder.
Yes.
You know, but yeah, you just want them close. You just want to take variables out.
On that static length measurement, as far as the hitting portion, to get very close, it does have a difference. So if somebody's got, let's say, broad shoulders versus slender hips, or if they're wider hip like Rocco Mediate versus broader, so the ratios are going to be tweaked. Yep. So it is not a fixed measurement.
Yep. We've started to, from the motion tracking side, we've looked at spine angle as an indicator.
Yeah, I was just about to talk about that, because that's, if you look at, say a tour pro versus an amateur, they have totally different posture. So, that scale just it would never match up, because a tour pro would always use something probably a little longer, just because they're a little more upright. They're not all bent over and crouched down with their butt sticking out. That's not a position that you can really hit the ball well from, but that's what most of us do.
Yeah.
So that's why.
It's just interesting. Yeah, we've started to learn and seeing how it changes, and then it's like, well, okay, you can't just look at that one variable or indicator as simply as that, because then what if somebody's doing the arms and they're doing T-Rex arms if the club's too long, and they're somehow able to maintain a constant spine angle, but then their arms are absorbing everything.
Right.
And so it's, to try to get to the right answer is very complicated. And so,
Did you guys do anything on grip fitting?
Again, we've tested. We've tested on it, and it was really interesting. Like, our research kind of shown, like, the traditional wives' tale, or the approach is that a smaller grip will increase rotation, face rotation, help you close it. For a lot of people, we found that's exactly opposite. And we don't know exactly why, but the hypothesis is tension. That
they're squeezing so hard.
They're squeezing so hard that they don't rotate it. Because in theory, if you think about it, well, I'm turning a smaller handle. Well, yeah, I am going to rotate it more and faster versus a bigger handle. But then you can't be that myopic. You have to include other variables like hand tension. So by going to a bigger grip, we've had a lot of people actually reduce their slice simply because it gets the tension out.
Well, I think that's the one thing, that the biggest thing I've taken from the podcast, and I think it's 3 years now, is some very smart people coming on. It's the technology and all the measurements that we're able to gather nowadays, and even using AI. It's like, okay, it's taken us back to step one, in that we knew everybody was different to begin with. That you cannot put everybody in the same, let's say, 3 boxes and then expect them to do well.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it just depends on what their recipe and their formula is, based off all the things that we're able to extract.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, what is it called? The Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you heard of that? You have your y-axis, your assumed knowledge on a subject, and then the x-axis is your actual experience, and how it jumps really up fast, and you think you know everything, and then as soon as you cross a little bit more experience, it drops down to
falls
zero.
Off.
Yeah, and so, I think that was, a few years ago, I hit the point when we started this journey of doing this, that I was basically at that rock bottom. I've been doing this for multiple years and had a lot of success, and then all of a sudden started learning how much I didn't know and everything, and how much we were just kind of frustrated with the way that everybody that knew everything.
Was it Milton Friedman, the old economist, when he said, or was it Mark Twain's quote, that he was saying that it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you're 100% sure of that always is the thing that gets you in trouble.
I haven't heard that one, but I agree.
Yeah.
And that's, it's
at least if you don't know, you know you don't know it, and you're maybe open to
learning.
But if you're 100%, no, this is the way it is, it's like, okay, maybe not.
Yeah.
Today.
Not today.
There's just way too much information out there.
Exactly. And that's kind of the key, right? When we're talking about the grips and the length and spine angles and swing weight and everything, is just, there's so much left to learn out there. And, we've done our best to figure out primarily the shaft and then helping people center it and then matching heads up based on, does somebody need more of a draw bias or a more spin, less spin, higher launch, lower launch, kind of fixing that with the head.
Does it get in a rate of closure on the gears?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I see these guys arguing that, and they're like, oh, what's his, Hovland. Hovland's got the lowest rate of closure, I think, on tour, that it stays square to the target line. I can't remember if it's target line or plane. The longest, it's like, okay, that's good if you're off, but all it's got to do is be on there for, what, 1/100th of a second? It's got to be square at that point. Doesn't matter if it's... I think Colin Montgomery had a huge rate of closure, and the guy hit it straighter or as straight as anybody in history.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you try to fixate on any single variable on its own, you're going to fail. You just can't, because there's so many other things going on that's where I think the real power of AI machine learning is like, when we sit there and we try to guess, I mean, I was led the development of this AI, and I can come sort of kind of close to predicting what these shafts are going to be recommended for a golfer, but I don't know. Because I don't care. I mean, I'm not even nowhere near as smart as like Albert Einstein or any of these guys. They can't calculate 500,000 data points in a minute. I don't care. No human can. That's where computers are really cool. And used appropriately, they really can help answer some of these questions.
Does the AI also deal with the shaft weight, whether it be a driver, it's if you're going to go 55 to 90, or if you're an iron, if you're going to go low.
A weird thing about the weight, I'll say, because we look at the clubs that they have, but it has no bearing on what we're going to fit them into. But, it's good to know where they're starting from. A lot of times, the weight that comes up is the weight that they've been using. And I probably attribute that to that's where they're comfortable, because they've been doing it for so long. So the weights a lot of times are the same. But, there's times that it's totally different. So you can't, go by that one thing. There's
even on the note, sticking with the theme of taking one thing on its own, we'll hear people getting into huge debates, if they should be in a 60 or a 70 gram shaft or a 50 or a 60. I've been fiddling while we're talking with a ballpoint pen in my hand. This ballpoint pen weighs 12 grams. I know that because I weighed it the other day. Because I had to, just to show somebody, 12 grams is nothing. It's a ballpoint pen. And in terms of human movement, do you really think we're going to speed up or slow down if we have 10 grams? Does it matter? No, not throughout the whole club. Doesn't really matter. It's more of a feel type of thing. And then you're not like a driver head is 205 grams on the driver. The grip is between 50 and 70 grams. Depending on what grip it is, and if it has cords and size.
Cord, mid-size, all that
stuff, right? So I'm now up to 275 grams or 255 grams. Now you add in the shaft. It's 50 or 70. So you'd sit there and say, 50 grams is, oh my God, that's 30% lighter than 70. Well, it is, but in terms of the total club, it's only a small percentage of the total weight of a club.
Does it? Do you, as far as not the calculations it does, but most of the recommendation you guys are seeing, have you seen anything where somebody's picking up if they're having 60 versus 80 or 90 in their driver shaft, or if they're swinging 110 gram iron shaft versus 130? Are you seeing differences in speed, whether it's up or down?
So what we see, so a lot of times we'll show them exactly how their performance was with all the different shafts. They don't know what the shafts were, but we'll tell them at the end what they were. And the reason why, one of the big reasons why we tell them is so they know that they were swinging a 40 gram, ladies flex and an 80 gram X flex, and they said they all felt fine.
And the speed is the same.
And the speed is always the same. Sometimes even faster with the heavier.
Because, that's what we have found. If anything, it's faster with the heavier. Is we feel that sensory, the proprioception of a softer, lighter shaft, for a lot of people, they feel it getting away from them. And they feel it loading or switching from lag to lead deflection too early. And so if they see that, then
They
they
hit the brakes.
hold on. They put the brakes on and they don't release the club. Whereas you get a heavier shaft, again, it's against the rules of physics in the iron Byron, but we're not robots.
Yeah, we know that model doesn't work.
Right. We're not robots. We have feelings and we adjust based on how stuff feels to us. And so, again, it's not like saving 10 grams throughout the length of a club. I mean, if you put 10 grams way at the bottom at the toe of the club, then yeah, we'd probably feel that because that's a long lever. But spread out throughout the whole shaft, it doesn't affect our strength in terms relative to human strength. But we do find for a lot of people, they actually feel swing easier and more free, which helps pick up speed with a heavier and stiffer shaft.
Makes them engage a little bit more. Right, the body I'm talking, the musculature of the body is engaged more versus limp.
Exactly. Yeah. Another one we get to in terms of weight is like, first 12 holes it'll be fine, but after that it gets too heavy. I'm like, well, why don't you take one golf ball, which weighs 50 something grams? Take one golf ball out of your bag and compensate for it. You know,
It's interesting how AI is moved into the golfing world. I know I had Sasha McKenzie on. We were talking about his stack system, and you know that the recalibration on your advancement or if you should regress is all based off the AI input.
Yep.
And it's constantly taking everything, all the input is given from all around the world, and it's constantly recalibrating, calculating.
It's really cool. It's it's one of these amazing tools that it just helps you solve problems. You just have to be curious and willing to admit you don't know. And you're going to have to go through that period of not knowing anything. And then you hopefully come out the other side and are a little bit closer to being right.
What do you see coming next in industry? Because you're obviously you're using things that would be considered somewhat cutting edge, and that it wasn't the traditional way, and you guys have found what is or should be used to achieve a better result. So you're obviously you're in the know on what's out there and what's being utilized, and what do you see that might be coming as the next thing? Like if AI is here now, even though it's not to the masses, is there something that's coming that?
I think more better AI. I've seen some like Arcos and 18 Birdies starting to do some really cool things with course strategy in terms of helping golfers recommend what clubs they should be playing. Learning how far they're actually hitting things.
Yeah, I know Lou Stagner on Twitter is real big on that.
And then
Lou. I think he's a statistician. We got to try to get him on.
Yeah, I mean that's some of the what the pros are doing in terms of course management, and then combining this with some of they know okay, well if I overswing, I might miss personally. I'll miss to the left or to the right or whatever it is, and empowering amateurs to have that same knowledge. Right, so that you can start to say, okay, well, I'm kind of between clubs here, and I know if I go under, I'm going to kind of have to go after it. So maybe I don't move. I'm going to move my aim point 8 yards towards the left edge of the green instead of center, because I know I'll probably hit more of a cut on this one or something. I think those are the types of
tendencies. It's tracking their tendencies.
Exactly, and then because when you're out there playing with your buddies, you're out there having fun. You're not paying attention. But if you use the app and record the data, it's going to tell you your tendencies. It's going to learn them for you. I think that'll be a big thing.
Well, to use that example, it's like at Old South, the first hole. You got water all the way down the left side, and you got the oak trees all the way down the right side. I always aim at the left edge of the right oak trees, because if I hit it straight, I'm on the right center of the fairway. If I pull it, I'm still left side. And if I block it, I can still punch out of the trees, but I'm not hitting 3 out of a drop.
Right.
And, it's the old school people. Oh, don't you have any confidence? Like, yeah, I do, but I don't. I'm human. I don't hit it.
Yeah.
Even if I'm hitting it good, I'm hitting maybe 75% of the shots.
Yeah.
The way I intend.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that'll be a big thing. Just more improvement in AI in terms of fitting what we're doing, the club head design. Like what Callaway's doing is learning where people are missing. That's where their AI is in their face design.
I think did Cobra use that when they started moving the sweet spot on driver higher and towards the toe?
They might have.
Where they made it, they changed the ellipse of the face. They on an angle
with
they tilted it.
Exactly. They did that. TaylorMade did that when they did. So I think it's just learning and just getting smarter, because people tend to miss in certain directions or in certain areas, and it'll be really interesting to see, when we get if we can get to the point of more mass customization in terms of faces. Like what we end up doing is when we're fitting a face is we'll learn where each driver, for example, has a hot spot versus a low spot. And if somebody misses high toe.
Yeah, like the old Tour Exotic, that 13 degree used to go further than your driver.
Yeah.
Catch that hot spot.
And it's not like any one of those clubs is better or worse. They just are different, and so it's just about matching those up. But hey, maybe, maybe TaylorMade or somebody or whoever it is might end up having the same driver with 3 different faces. And each face has a different ellipse.
Right, to match your profile.
To match your profile. I don't have any inside knowledge or anything. I mean, that's just something that could happen. That'd be pretty cool.
I mean, it's kind of similar to what they did with aircrafts. When they would come back from, battle, they'd see where the bullet holes were and they'd be patching them, But then they realized that where those bullet holes were, they still came back. So instead of reinforcing them that way, they actually reinforced the spots that weren't getting hit, because those are the ones that aren't coming back. They're getting hit in those critical spots.
Yeah, there's a reason why these are coming back and the other ones
the aircraft can survive being hit here.
Exactly. So now that's kind of what they're doing. Instead of, making that sweet spot here bigger, they're dispersing it and putting it in places where the amateurs are actually reaching it, because the center of that club face for a lot of amateurs stays really, really new looking.
Yeah, that's right. It's such a difference too between amateurs and the tour.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, look at Tiger's clubs when they had them for sale.
And,
and the wear spot on his 8-iron was smaller than a dime.
Right. And so there's a lot we can learn from the tour, and there's a lot we can learn from the best golfers in the world. Just like anything, you can learn and sample what the best do, but you also have to be realistic on what you should or can mimic from them. And not
it doesn't translate to Mrs. Havoc Camp.
Right.
You're not going to use what Dustin Johnson can do and go out and take it to somebody else.
Right. It's like if I was training for basketball, I wouldn't adopt LeBron James' training regimen. No. Yeah, I'm not that good an athlete. Even if I was, I would break down. He has an incredible ability to be durable. So no, you shouldn't adopt his training regimen because we'd be broken.
Right.
Yeah,
that's why the top of the top, the elite of the elite. I mean, that's a certain individual who is just built a certain way that they don't break down. They're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger,
and they have better nerve control. They have better things. So it's like, what can we learn from them? But how do we apply that to everybody? It's fun when we have a pro in and stuff, but they don't pay for clubs. So it's fun when we do help them out, and it's cool to put on Instagram and everything, but they don't really pay the bills. It's the rest of us, the millions of the masses out there.
Well, I mean,
we're the ones that we really
always the
care
masses.
about.
Look at the best-selling car. I mean, you can talk about Tesla and everything else all you want to. Best-selling cars every year is a Camry and a Honda Accord. Right. Every single year.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's really cool to see what McLaren and Ferrari are doing.
Yeah, Bugatti. And they're customizing their brakes because it's going so fast and it's got to slow within 3 seconds from 250 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's great, but
doesn't have a lot of relevance to the Honda Accord.
We're not going to see one driving around Sea Pine Circle.
Right, exactly. So it's trying to think, learning from the best, but what can we apply to the mass is a big deal.
We covered a shit ton today. I mean, how long let me see. Yeah, we got a lot in. You guys ready to do a little rapid fire and then check out?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let me get the list here.
All right.
This is
you're
always
just answering?
I don't know. We'll each answer.
Well, we'll do one for each of you. I'll ask, and the first one, the last one, everyone get. It's the same for everybody.
Okay.
So, you Ryder Cup. You make the Ryder Cup. Everyone's got a walk-up song now. What would your walk-up song be?
Ooh, what would my walk-up song be? Probably Welcome to the Jungle, because I'm pretty sure that's where my tee shot's going.
That's pretty good. I was thinking They See Me Rolling. They hating.
Let's see. If you could sit on a bench and talk to anyone in history, who would it be?
A recent one, I just caught a couple episodes of Ken Burns' show on Ben Franklin. That guy would be pretty cool.
Very interesting guy to talk to.
He would be a very interesting guy. I learned about him in history in school, but I had no idea. Mm-hmm. He'd be a really cool one.
I'd probably say Tiger's dad. I would love to know how he did what he did. I think it was pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. So I just love to pick his brain and see what he was thinking and how he knew to do the things that he knew.
That'd be an interesting one too. Hard to argue with those two.
Yep.
Your go-to word when you hit a bad shot on a golf course?
I can't say it. My mom might listen to this.
For me, I just say, "Yep, yep, I did that."
All right, moving on. Best James Bond. Who is your favorite James Bond?
Sean Connery for me.
For me, it's the current one, or the one that's no longer current, but
Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig, yeah.
He comes up a lot. I'm a Connery guy because I grew up in that era, but a lot of people have said Daniel Craig.
It's close.
Yeah,
I really like.
When I first saw, the first one that I saw, I think it was Casino Royale, I think, and he was in it, and I'm like, oh, who is this guy? This is gonna suck. And I watched it, and it was good. And I was like, and then he just got better. So
yeah, you're not gonna go wrong with either one of those answers.
I just Connery was the prototypical. He was big. He was dapper. He had it all.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yep.
And then what was he, like 80 years old? Got Sexiest Man Alive on People Magazine or whatever.
Yeah.
One of those things.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into a casino. What's the first game you're playing?
Blackjack.
I'll do craps.
That's the only two. I used to go with Mick Colella to the Pro-Am out in Vegas that Barry Fleming always ran. That's the only two games he would play. And he would say, I study this shit. I don't come out here to lose money.
Yeah.
He said, it's the only two that you have a decent chance to win at. And every morning, because we're in a time change.
Yeah.
Because he'd be up at 4 in the morning. He's down at the casino. I'd be in the lobby waiting for him at 8. So here it's 5, and he come out with this permagrin. I'm like, how much today? He's like $1,500. Next day, $1,100. I told you I ain't come out here to lose.
Yeah.
Would you rather live 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future?
Future.
Past.
All right. Any reasons? Just. Not to jump off the rapid fire, but always curious to hear.
For me, I just think about, so I'm in my 40s. So if I look from, my child years to the 20s, it was a pretty good time. Mm-hmm. Nowadays it's not as good. I'm doing well and my family's doing well, thank goodness. But, I think they would have had more fun growing up
back
where
then.
You rode your bike to the neighbor's house and you played basketball all day and,
Yeah, your mom. You left when your mom didn't even care where you were all day. She knew you were coming home.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Saturday morning cartoons.
Right. Cereal.
Yeah, you're right.
Pop-Tarts.
I don't know. I might change my answer after that.
All right, couple more. If you could buy stock in any golfer the next 5 years, who would it be?
I'm doing Colin.
I'd stick with Scheffler. Because, and the reason being is if you hear people talk about him, they're talking about him like it's just an anomaly. Mm-hmm. But he was winning a long time before he came on tour. And for a while, my wife would hear me on the couch like, oh my gosh, here comes Scotty doesn't know again. It's going to ruin this tournament. I want to see somebody like real win. I don't want to see Scotty Scheffler win.
He's won at every level.
And now he's,
That's the track record of the champions. They've won at junior, they won at college, they won at...
Yeah. He knows how to win.
Yes, he knows how to win. And he's not. He doesn't seem to be stuck up on... Because you look at his swing, and some will argue, well, it's technically correct, but it's not your cookie cutter, do what all the others are doing.
It's not an overly machined swing.
He just gets up and he swings at it. Especially,
he plays golf.
Yes, he plays golf. That's the best way to say it.
He's not a swinger.
Speaking of swings, who has the best swing in golf?
Ever or now?
Your choice.
If I'm going ever, I would probably say Freddie Couples. I loved that swing. Now, That's tough.
That is a tough one. They're all good. You know.
I kind of like Tiger's swing.
Yeah, I think his swing now is as good as it's ever been.
It's more controlled now. You know, it looks like he's playing golf now. Like before, his swing was powerful and awesome, and you know it was fun to watch. Mm-hmm. But now it seems like he's just precision. Like before, when he won the Zozo, I thought he was gonna go on a tear because he dominated. He played so well there, and then, you know, things happened. But
right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I go Tiger.
Yeah, hard to go against Tiger. Which brings us to the last question. The greatest of all time.
Tiger.
Jack.
Now that's interesting because it's usually generational, and you being in your 40s and saying Jack goes against the grain.
It does.
It's usually anyone 50 and over has said Jack, and anyone 50 and under or under 50 has said Tiger.
Well,
yeah.
But like I tell everybody, I mean, it's an argument that will go on forever.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah, I mean, you know, statistically, they're so close. Mm-hmm. But Jack has, he has a really great record. Well, he doesn't have as many wins as Tiger, but like top 10s and top 5s in majors.
Yes, I was reading this morning on social media. He played in the 70s, all 40 majors. I think it was the top 5. He came in the top 5 35 times.
Yeah.
And for a decade. Never came 35 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Top 5.
I think it just comes down to whether or not you believe in the depth of the field argument. That Jack, he had obviously some other amazing golfers that he competed against, but you know the top 20 were amazing. Mm-hmm. Not so sure about 21 on. Now,
yeah, that's fair.
You know, as much as I hate to say it, and I guess you could call me a fan of his Brandles, but because he's not afraid to say something. I always said Brandle, Johnny Miller, Dick Vitale, they're not cookie cutters, so I think they're needed for their sport.
Yeah.
He made an interesting comment about Jack's second place finishes and third place finishes across the spectrum of his career, as opposed to just wins, and that was a compelling argument, I thought. But I say tell everybody you can flip a quarter as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, either one, exactly.
All right, boys, I've had fun. How can someone find you guys? Where do you online, social media?
Yeah, online is probably the easiest. It's swingfitclubs.com is the easiest way to find us.
And they can schedule fitting whether they're in South Beach, Miami, or here in Hilton Head. They just get on there.
Exactly. Learn more about it. We got some videos up there. Feel free to
YouTube channels on social media or all that good stuff.
We have Facebook, Instagram. The marketing department's been slacking on some of the YouTube videos.
Yeah. We talk about it. We
talk about it a lot.
I'll have it for everybody out there. I'll have all the links in the summary. They can just click on it and follow you. Have the link to your webpage, and they can get on, click on, come get fit, check it all out.
Awesome.
Put on the suit with all the buttons on it.
You get at the very least, you get a really cool video of you as an avatar to take home and show your friends and family.
That thing's got to get hotter in hell in the summer. Or do you do it all in? Keep the doors closed.
We keep the doors closed in the summer.
Okay.
Before we go out. Yeah. And you know what? The good news is the version you had on is a lot cooler than the original. Oof. The original was like the full length jacket.
Who's tasked with washing that thing when you?
Yeah,
we take turns.
Just after the day, just take it home, bring it in the next day, it's ready to go.
Perfect. Yeah. All right, guys, I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM. DIGM, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353.